putting forward in here, I wanted to research a bit myself about the ability of the Egyptians, what kind of stuff they were doing, and I found this article saying that they had created, in some of the statues, they had created like crystal eyes that were so real they looked like eyes, but the way they'd done it, the ability for them to be able to do that stuff, we couldn't even do it today with our optics, the way we can smooth glass about it. They had done it so well that people would struggle to be able to do that, and that is just something that they've created for art. And there was also that thing about, so there's some of their engravings on some of the stuff they've created is so small that they would have to have used some sort of magnification to be able to do it, because today we need to be able to magnify it to actually see what's actually done in there.
Sure.
So I think from my point of view, right, you've got ability to be able to create a massive stone structure, but then also on stuff that people generally may or may not, because there's artefacts that aren't shown in museums kept in storage that we're like, how the fuck did they make an obsidian vase that's like 10 mil thick all the way through, but it's been carved out of stone? And how did they do that with copper tools? So they had amazing technology that we can't replicate today. It's just crazy. So when we're talking about the theories and stuff you're putting forward, and from my sceptical brain, which is part of the reason that Paul and I have these conversations, I'm immediately going, well, how the fuck could they have looked at, compounds or whatever it is, molecules in that way, and had an understanding of DMT? How could would they even have had the ability to extract DMT from the acacia tree or whatever it is? Would they have had that knowledge? Well, yeah, fuck me, they would have done. Of course they would have done, because they were alchemists, weren't they? You told me this. Alchemy is an Egyptian word, is it?
Yeah. Ancient Egypt, by their own admission, used to be called Alchemet, which is where we get that word from. Alchemy today.
So they must have been, and their abilities to do medical procedures are still, we used to think they were stupid, and sorry, not stupid, but they weren't as clever as us. But there's bones found where bodies have been healed and continue to live on for years and years after, which means they had a capability to be able to take an arm off or do some sort of brain surgery. So there's stuff we're not looking at, we don't understand, but we just ignore it because it isn't mainstream.
Yep. Well, you have there's a famous relief. I can't remember off the top of my mind where it is, but it's another god of creation, a fertility god known as Mene, and he's actually seen with an erect penis with what looks like a snake coming from the tip of his penis. But if you again look at that through a more scientific lens as well, that could quite easily be spoken of in terms of semen.
Yeah. Which is snake-like.
Which is snake-like.
And how would they have known that if they couldn't magnify that stuff?
There you go. Again, you bring this up to an Egyptologist, they'll either want to run a mile, shut you down, not want to have a conversation with you, or just hit you with the derogatory term of pseudoscientist.
Doesn't fit the paradigm.
Exactly. But the Great Pyramids themselves and the artifacts that you're talking about certainly don't fit the paradigm with what they're kind of spoon-feeding us at the moment. Not only were they technologically more astute, not more astute than we are today, but at least to a level where they can understand the higher sciences of geometry, engineering, and molecular structures alike. There's definitely something missing. Which is what I like to think. Yeah, where I come in and try and sort of fit the puzzles together, because a lot of these guys have a piece of the puzzle: the geologist, the mathematician, the physicist, the biologist, the Egyptologist, but they're not playing the same game. Yet they've all got a piece to the same puzzle, as it were.
Yeah. It needs to be fitted together. And I
suppose certainly does.
The more and more people that do what you're doing, the more and more parts of the puzzle are going to come together, and the wider the scope, people are going to be able to start to look at it. And I suppose that's one of the the beauties of what you've done, and the fact that, you know, Graham Hancock was one of the first ones that probably you got into and I got into back in the day with Paul, and he was, you know, basically insulted by the ologists wherever he went. And it's funny how now, you know, the stuff that he was saying back in the early 90s is now becoming a mainstream view. We've got the younger Dryas. We all now have this belief that civilization was wiped out at some point, and there must have been a very knowledgeable globe-trotting civilization prior to that. And like you rightly said earlier, or what you've said before about the fact that there's hundreds of thousand years of anatomical man roaming this planet, where we are led to believe that they were just living in caves for the majority of it, and then eventually became hunter-gatherers, and then eventually became brought on the theories or the knowledge of agriculture and animal husbandry. In my mind, it's bullshit. 200,000 years, that's 20,000 years of pop, 9 civilizations, if not 10, where we could have built up over 20,000 years. Now, what knowledge have we gained in the last fucking 500 years? If you put that over 20,000 years to a past civilization, you could have had so many different civilizations that built up, left a little bit off the back, left a little bit off the back, each one gaining more and more steps towards something, to the last one before us that got fucking wiped out. They've left us these little gems of information that we've managed to ream stuff off the ancient. We proposed that the ancient Greeks, like Pythagoras, gave us these theories. They picked up a lot of this stuff from the Egyptians.
Yeah.
And the Egyptians talk about the fact that they picked up this stuff from stuff that was left to them. So there's stuff that's been left to the Egyptians, which allowed them and the Greeks and then the Romans, and for us all to progress off the back of something that came long before. And how many catastrophes has this planet seen? We were discussing on the way down here, Rick, that have just completely, you know, you got the shift, the stuff that's saying there was a shift of the poles, and you're saying it was 23 degrees. That, if the planet shifted 23 degrees, the amount of destruction that would be caused by that would literally wipe any megalith off of this planet. So you could have had a civilization that built up an amazing global network. When a catastrophe comes in, it just wipes it out so that there's nothing left.
Sure.
Completely destroyed.
Sure. And at the end of the younger Dryas that we're talking about, which is, again, like you say, Hancock has rightly been somewhat vindicated now with regards to this celestial impact that happened around, 12,800 years or so ago. We're kind of, it's almost like a relay race to a certain extent, where the proverbial baton has been handed over from one civilization to another. And the only thing that's really survived, other than the mythology that comes with it, like Atlantis lost, civilizations that have again been lost to humanity, really. Something quite profound was going on a long time ago, and to almost poo-poo that and say that it never happened is almost derogatory to ourselves, to our own human ingenuity, you know. I said earlier on that we kind of almost arrogantly assume ourselves to be at the apex of civilized high society. We're somewhat poking around blindly in outer space, congratulating ourselves and patting ourselves on the back about how clever we are, that we are the greatest, but maybe we weren't, you know. Maybe there was something else. I do believe that not only were we technologically savvy in a bygone era, but I believe that we were spiritually savvy as well, with regards to, I said, poking around blindly in outer space, when I think kind of the higher realms of the human potential and the human experience, consciousness, as it were, lies somewhat untapped and dormant inside us.
Yeah, right. And you got that, you mentioned in the book about the Dogon tribe.
Yeah, Yeah.
and what they knew.
Sure. A lot of that is off the back of the much famed work of Laird Scranton. But we now know that the Dogon of modern day Mali, which is still considered a modern day primitive tribe, were at one point considered themselves pre-dynastic ancient Egyptians. And they don't really have a written system today. Their creation story is always sort of spoken about by their priesthoods in terms of pictoglyphs and symbology, which wouldn't look out of place today in the 21st century on a biologist or a physicist's whiteboard.
Yeah.
It's extremely profound stuff, and I'm not saying that they understood the subatomic realms of quantum physics like their creation story somewhat dictates, but I think that they're, again, handing this proverbial baton over to us with mythological allegories for just a highly evolved science that has been lost to yesteryear.
And maybe built up off the back of not the technology we use today, but the exploration of consciousness.
Certainly.
And the use of psychedelics. So Andrew Gallimore and his new research that he wants to do about exploring the DMT realm over longer periods, they could have been doing this shit thousands of years ago and got the information that we may find comes out in the next 10 years from the medical stuff that they're doing now at the Royal College of London.
Yeah.
You know, and that'll be very interesting. You know, watch this fucking space, because we don't know what's going to happen there. But maybe these guys were doing it. And when we say about the technology that we use to examine the quantum realm, if you're using a psychedelic to examine the quantum realm, which is why the Dogon tribe have got this pictographs, because that's what they've seen there, that's the information they've been given, and it's stuff that they've built up in their creation story, and we're putting it together in the 21st century from the technology we've got, so we come about at the same answer with the same pictographs, if you like, but from two different technologies that are able to perceive this stuff.
Sure. And again, it's should we have worked this stuff out, what it means to be human, what the pineal gland might all be about, why DMT it somewhat appears to be some kind of prerequisite for the human experience. For the untapped inner realms of our conscious being. If we actually understood the nature of our own minds, would we really need to kind of rely on these draconian religious institutes that are promoted by the state, which are quite obviously designed to kind of divide us and keep us arguing about, I guess, I keep reverting to this comic strip version of events of what happened in, whether it's the Bible, you name a religion, it all comes back to the same, I guess, starting point of ancient Egyptian mythology. And what do we take from mythology, you know? Osiris is spoke of in terms of god of resurrection, as psychonauts around the world might testify to, with regards to the DMT realm, as mind-bogglingly scary as that realm can be. Upon entering it, you most certainly feel cleansed and reborn again once you're back from that DMT mindscape. And I think that the myths and the allegorical folklore that's talking about this immaterial other realm, I don't think it's all pseudoscience. I don't think it's all hogwash, poppycock. I think there's something profound and significant with regards to the human experience going on here somewhere. So we're told that the gods reside inside us. No matter what religion you come from, God resides inside us. Which was a statement that for many a year I kind of poo-pooed. What does that mean entirely? But should you actually look at the the biomechanics of the human brain, or human brain anatomy, resurrected gods of the modern era, of a bygone age, of a Dogon era, of an ancient Egyptian era, all seem to be pointing to what some people might call pareidolia, faces in clouds. You're seeing something that's not there, but when you actually look at a cross-section of the human brainstem, or posterior view of the human brainstem, it's pretty obvious that the Crucifer, I hate to say it, fiction probably never happened, and that these gods of resurrection quite clearly do lie. They do lie inside us.
What is that part there then? Brainstem.
That's the brainstem.
That's the replication of Osiris.
Osiris.
Man.
Well, you've got Christ crucified, correlating with the brainstem. Christ, his head basically correlates with where the pineal gland lies in the human brainstem. And ironically, Jesus was meant to have worn a crown of thorns. That crown of thorns was known was known as the acacia variety. And acacia, again, is symbolic of the ancient Egyptian god of resurrection, Osiris, who was believed to be the complete embodiment of all things acacia. What does that mean? The lifeblood of Osiris, the lifeblood of Jesus, the lifeblood of the acacia, the molecular structure of the acacia hides something quite scientifically and symbolically profound. It contains highly extractable potentials of the God-inducing entheogen compound, DMT. And again, we can either say this is pareidolia, this is woo-woo, or we can actually say there's something quite symbolic going on here.
Yeah. Which then leads you to the cover of the book and the identification of the molecular structure of DMT.
Okay, so Osiris was, how does the god of resurrection? Why was he the god of resurrection? Okay, so we pick up the story, the myth of Osiris, where he was at a great banquet and his brother, Seth, god of chaos, god of darkness, the yin and yang, the good, the evil, no matter how you want to look at it. He basically tricked Osiris into getting into what became a coffin. All the guests were asked to lay down inside this beautifully ornate wooden coffin, and whoever it befits, just like the Cinderella story that we retell today, they could actually keep it. Everyone came up too short, too tall, a little bit fat, a little bit too skinny until the son of Osiris. Osiris, we find that it fit absolutely perfectly. Unfortunately for him, Seth and his cohorts decided to further entomb Osiris by sealing him inside the tomb and tossing him into the River Nile, where basically this coffer was floating on the River Nile for quite some time until it ran ashores on the shores of Byblos, modern day Lebanon, and then grew further entombed as it basically, for want of a better description, became entombed within a great tamarisk tree, and a tamarisk tree is of the acacia variety also. The king of Byblos in time decided to fell the tree and hang it in his halls, which is where Osiris remained entombed for quite some time until his wife Isis learned of his fate. She then bargained with the king of Byblos to cut Osiris free from his tomb. This now resurrected god had been freed from inside the tamarisk tree, which further enraged Seth, who then dispatched of him again, chopping him up into some 14 pieces, dispersing his body about the land, where the spirit of Osiris then became synonymous with the constellation of Orion. And like a lot of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs and gods and deities of their time, when they passed on to the duat, the immaterial realm of the other side, or the DMT mindscape, as I'd like to call it, he became synonymous with the constellation of Orion. But what does this actually mean? Either the spirit of Osiris quite literally resides on Earth, as mythological lore says, within all things Acacia, being the complete embodiment of, or he resides as his celestial macrocosmic namesake, as the constellation of Orion. Now, what does that mean? I believe it means that this spiritually and technologically savvy society from a bygone era, and I'm not saying it was the ancient Egyptians, I was saying it was someone prior to the ancient Egyptians, prior to this catastrophe that happened 13,000 years ago, understood the molecular structure of DMT, the spirit molecule, understood its compound components, realized the significance of the macrocosmic namesake of Orion or Osiris in the sky, and actually depicted the namesake as a 2D macrocosmic mirror of a microscopic molecular structure of an entheogen compound found in nature. So what I'm basically saying is that when Osiris was somewhat rescued from inside the tamarisk tree, I'm saying that is basically a treasure hunt to the gods, as it were. Should a microcosmically and macrocosmically adept society like we are or consider ourselves today, understand the profound nature of DMT, where in nature to find it, we've actually got a almost like a proverbial treasure map to actually find out where the gods reside in nature, in the real world and inside us.
A bread trail, if you like.
Yeah,
Something to lead us
why not?
down the right route.
Why not? And again, these gods of resurrection are very, very symbolic of the DMT mindscape. And kind of coming out of this mindscape, one does or can't help but feel somewhat resurrected.
Definitely reborn.
Yeah, without a shadow. Without a shadow.
As many people will know.
Either that, or like Egyptology is trying to peddle still today, the ancient Egyptian gods of resurrection were actually rescued from inside trees, and then became constellations on the night sky, which is a lovely tale, don't get me wrong, but it's a comic book version of what's going on again, you know?
Yeah.
Again, just like the good book with Jesus and the God of resurrection. It's all the same mythology. There appears to be a lot more logic to the myth than meets the proverbial third eye.
Definitely.
Can I just add one thing, which is amazing? So obviously, your book, Gallimore's book, is about discovering the key in nature to
Indeed.
moving us on to a higher state of civilization, consciousness, etc. So,
Certainly.
essentially, coming at it from the same two different.
Yeah,
you know,
completely.
He's probably not aware of your ancient cosmological
Sure.
information and knowledge, but it almost seems that everybody is pointing in the same direction and coming towards the same point.
Yeah, most certainly. You've got, it's not just ancient Egyptian mythology as well. You can talk about the Mayans and the Incas and, the Ayahuasca brew, which again is another another profoundly symbolic fingerprint, let's say, with regards to the nature of the human experience. Ayahuasca is brewed from the root and bark of two carefully selected vines in the Amazonian rainforest, where there's some 150,000 different varieties that have been married up, that come together, that enable you to, I guess, see the psychedelic other side to what it actually means to be human. And ayahuasca actually roughly translates a Quechua word, which actually means the vine of souls.
That's right.
Which, quite incredibly as well, when we're told that the gods are divine. You can look at that as well. You chop that word up as well. Divine actually means of the vine.
It's divine.
It certainly is.
Also, just like to add there, the Graham Hancock story that he spoke about on Joe Rogan was that those people were, their history says that they were taken to the Amazon by another civilization, shown what they could do and how to live in that forest. And I've also heard that pretty much the Amazon was planted by humans because of the trees that grow in there. They were obviously selected trees and it's just overgrown. However, these people were taken, given that land, given some knowledge, but also given the understanding of the two plants to brew the ayahuasca, and it was given to them by an ancient civilization, and thereby that links us up with the people that were globally going around the world building these monoliths, these massive stone structures, hiding this information within it, whether it be in massive stone structures or linked spread trails, if you like, to look at Orion, look at this, look at that, and it's all coming back to the same thing, which is smash in this compound, then you will find your true God.
Indeed, and it says that you will find God, God residing within you, even in the good book as well. It's again, I hate to poo-poo religion and say everyone's wrong and offend people. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not here to do that at all. I'm kind of here to say that everyone's right, but they don't really know why. They've kind of been sold up this comic strip path again, if you know what I mean. Again, it's just to, I'll probably butcher this completely, but just to quote the Bible as well. Jacob apparently came face to face with God and survived. And yeah, ironically, a place called Peniel, which is mind-blowing in itself. And Peniel apparently resides between the only two temples on earth that weren't made by the hands of man, which again is within the skull. Again, you can relate that to the crucifixion, and I say fiction in air quotes. Again, not to make fun of things, don't get me wrong, but there seems to be a higher understanding of what it means to be human with regards to what's going on here, because apparently Christ was crucified in the place called Golgotha, which is also known as Calvary, which actually dictates as the place of the skull. And again, there's a profoundly looking hill there that maybe with a couple of whiskies and a shot of pareidolia, you can say that there's a face there that might look like a skull, or you can say that this crucifixion actually takes place inside our skull, where you've got Christ crucified, which is symbolic of the brainstem. Again, the gods do either reside inside us, or we can believe the hype and keep going to church and kind of getting the wool pulled under our eyes. And don't get me wrong, again, I'm not saying that they're all wrong. I'm saying that they're right, but quite clearly they really don't know why, and it all comes down to this mystical third eye. Again, which no matter how these unconnected or connected societies, civilizations from a bygone era that are no longer with us, quite clearly someone somewhere had worked out what it means to be human, the significance of this proverbial third eye, this mystical something else that's going on literally between our eyes, should we care to look inside. There's something far more profound than, again, these comic strip adventures of gods on clouds with with beards and a good book saying do this, don't do that. You know, there's something spiritually astute, something profoundly significant to what these guys are saying.
Speak your truth, you already know.
So again, this is Rick's book, Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods and Where in the World to Find Them. You can get it on Amazon, Rick.
Yep.
Website?
Not as yet. I should have one of the construct. Yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Facebook, Twitter. I think Rick's giving you Twitter.
Yeah, just RN Vooght, either YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. It's easy enough to find. It's not the most common name in the world, is it?
So Rick's got a second book coming out, which we'll talk about in another video. And yeah, I mean, it's epic stuff. We're all singing from the same page. This is what your skill set is all about. You know, touching on the DMT experience, God knows what that is all about inside of that experience, but that's what we're trying to delve into with this channel and sort of get more exposure to people to talk about it and to make these correlations. But yeah, awesome book, top geezer Rick, and we look forward to doing another one again soon.
Thank you. Stick with them. Cool cats.